Hey friends, Monica here with Calligraphy, and today I really wanted to talk to you about using a pencil in calligraphy. And there's two really big reasons that I generally like using it. One is that I find it really helpful for practice and just building the muscle memory on how you're going to adjust your tools, your hand, your arm, where you're going to be applying more pressure or less pressure, and the transition between those two different kind of strokes and movements. The second reason that I recommend using pencil for calligraphy is that you can draft out what you want your piece to look like. And just how your letters are going to be. So you can look at things like the spacing, the angle that you might have, or even the different style of letter that you might want to use for whatever piece you're going to be drafting. So when you use a pencil, you can obviously draft that a little bit, and then you're able to tweak it and make those changes so that when you take ink to paper, you're able to be a lot more confident in that you know that your spacing and things are there. That way you're only really focused on those pressure points, the shapes that you're making, and that we've drilled a lot. So we're gonna go through what each of these bits look like with the pencil. So just how we want to have the vertical pencil, or if we want to have more angle and start adding more pressure. And you can see a little bit of difference. It's not going to be the same as you would with a pen or a brush pen, more specifically, but that's okay because, as I said, you're just working on building muscle memory and that pressure, and when you're lifting and changing your tool that you'll be using. Now note, we're going to be lifting often, especially in the beginning as we're practicing drills, but as you get more comfortable, you'll start to be able to flow through some of the movements as you go. So with that, let's get started. Thanks for joining this practice along with me session. We are going to start with the upstrokes or entry strokes. And with these, I'm keeping the pencil nice and vertical, making sure that I'm giving light pressure. And I always like to start with this because I tend to be really shaky on these, as you can see, especially on a thin upstroke. So it's nice to get started with that, starting to relieve pressure. Then switching over to the downstroke, I'm going to angle my pencil a bit more. And though I'm not going to get a thick, heavy downstroke like I would with a brush pen, you can still see that I'm adding pressure, that line is a fair bit darker than the upstrokes, but really I'm again building that muscle memory in my hand to move at that angle. And then here we just put it together just to drill. With this, it's nice because it's really nice and easy to lift and obviously transition to change my position and pressure. It's a really good trigger for your brain to know, okay, I'm changing the stroke here and I need to change how my hand's positioned and what pressure stroke I'm going to give. Once we start putting it together, like in the next parts here, and also when we put them together into actual letters, it's really easy to forget those bits. So as we move into the underturn with this, similar, I want to make sure that I am giving the angle in my pencil, that I'm starting to apply more pressure. You can see that well, not thicker, but the darker downstroke. And then I want to make sure that I'm turning my pencil more vertical and giving a nice light upstroke. So again, it's just drilling and building that muscle memory into our positions here. With this, I lift in between changing strokes just because, again, it's a good trigger for my brain to say, okay, I need to go lighter here and I need to be more vertical. Switching to the overturn, we do the opposite. So we'll start with a nice light upstroke, and there I didn't because I was in the habit of putting a heavier pressure on that, and you can see that in the line. So there I put an X, and now I've got that kind of now I remember, and I've already messed that up, so I know now that I'm going thin on the upstroke, and then as I change, I'm going to turn the pencil position and go into a thicker, well, heavier at least, downstroke. So working with pencil calligraphy, it's more about practicing the position and pressure that you're applying, as opposed to seeing that thick and thin stroke that you'll be doing with calligraphy when you get to pen. Moving on to the next sheet, we're going to go into the compound curve, and I didn't really talk about this as much in the underturn and overturn, but I will here because as you see, when I'm practicing this, I'm more worried about the pressure that I'm putting in the position of my pencil than I am about some of the actual position of the stroke. And here you can see now I'm actually looking at, well, the difference between the positions on my stroke. I want it to be a bit more even from the top to the bottom, as opposed to having a kind of wide base there or at top of the other side, on the right side of the compound curve. So here now I'm focused on pressure and then pencil position, but I'm also looking at now position of where I'm drawing my compound curve. So you can see here, that one's really nice. There's even spacing between here, whereas when I started the first one, it wasn't quite so much that way. And I know the workbook isn't perfect, but these are just things that we're working on that we can strive towards. So just want to give you other things that you can be looking at if you're starting to get a feel for the pressure and the strokes and how your position should be. You can also look at things like spacing. From the oval, we start on the right side, and again I want to go vertical with my pencil, stop and adjust. And then I can go heavier here on the pressure and then readjusting my position each time. I'm going to carry on doing the same thing with the rest of my strokes, and it's just a good idea to start to practice and warm up some of these basic strokes before you start any project or piece. Again, as you can see, I made some errors myself on starting an upstroke with a heavier pressure and heavier hand. So just running through the drills lets you kind of get the shakes out, and as I said, just practice what you want your strokes to look like, the thinness, the thickness when you do move over to a pen. With the pencil, it's really helpful just to work on that muscle memory of having more angled pencil or more angled tool when you're using something else, and then a more vertical part when you're going on the upstroke here. And then after this, we're going to move into writing some practice words and then finish out with a word to end the day. And you can see the real-time bit on how long it actually takes when you're paying attention to all the positions of your pen during each part of the stroke. Not just the letter, but each stroke within a letter and how that comes together. Here I'm going to draft out the word that we're going to ink shortly after this, but I just want to again practice writing each of these letters, where my thin upstrokes are going to be and where my heavy downstrokes are going to be. Also for where I'm going to be connecting each letter, so that I'm making sure that I'm bringing the stroke before it to meet that line, or that before I start on a stroke, I'm ready for the next one. So that's that part about thinking ahead a little bit that we've talked about in the basic strokes video. And obviously we're going very slow. It's not like handwriting. People think that we're going to be writing this just as quickly as you'd be writing a word on a piece of paper in school. But with calligraphy, you're going to take your time and be more focused on each individual stroke, not just the letter or the word that you're building. So once we've drafted this out, we're going to move into ink this with a brush pen. At this stage in your calligraphy journey, I'm not as worried about spacing just yet, or the slants, that those are all equal. I think that you're still wanting to focus more on the basics and just getting those basic strokes together and how they connect together to create words, what they should entail in terms of your pressure, position on your pen, and just starting to get really, really comfortable with that, almost to the point where you're putting some of those thick and thin strokes together easily, as in transitioning between the two without having to lift as often. That means you've got a bit more control in the transition too. You can obviously work on spacing and the slants as you're practicing too, but I think it's a little bit less of a heavy focus in the very, very beginning. So that's just why I didn't add slant lines into these practice sheets. So you can see almost 2 minutes to write just one word, but I'm really happy with how we practiced the basic strokes and drilled it so that we could connect these letters to create this word, while all still kind of meeting those basic strokes and finding areas that we can work on and improve throughout. So with this, I say every practice is good, it's positive, right? Even if it didn't come out perfect or anything, we learned something from each of them. We found something that we want to work on and fix for next time. So thanks for practicing with me, and I hope you'll join a future one.